Half Size Me, episode 710, brought to you by the amazing Half Size Me Academy. To join us, please go to halfsizeme.com/join. Hello, beautiful listeners. Today, I have got an amazing episode for you. I have the really awesome Dr. Ted Naiman on, who wrote the book Satiety per Calorie, Eating Solved. I loved this book, and I really enjoyed having a conversation with Dr. Ted Naiman. You know, I don't normally bring people on here to share their books on weight loss or health, typically, because for the most part, a lot of the stuff that's out there is not super helpful, in my opinion. But his book is, and he's been doing this for a really long time. He, of course, is a doctor himself. He works with patients, but he's also really been in the health and wellness sphere for quite a while as well. And when I heard about this book that he was putting together and just how simple and yet effective it would be for everybody to better understand what foods bring the most satiety per calorie and how to start thinking about eating differently, I definitely wanted to get him on the show. So if you would like to check out his book, it is available on Amazon. He's also selling it through his website, which is where I bought a copy of it. I would highly encourage you to check it out. But in a nutshell, we tend to think about often eating based on what tastes good, not what's actually going to move the needle when it comes to being satiated, not being hungry, being able to lose weight without, say, even maybe needing medical intervention, things like that. We don't often think about eating that way. We often think, oh, what sounds good to me, or what would taste good, or what sounds fun. But I really like this approach because he gives you ways to kind of start to transition from that to what would be a level up, what's a step up in the right direction when it comes to satiety per calorie, picking a more satiating food, what are the most satiating foods. So if you've ever really struggled with your eating, making those decisions, and maybe seeing food through a different lens could be of help to you, then this is your episode. And again, Ted's awesome. He's been doing this for a really long time, and he has been totally transparent on changing over time based on what he has learned and seen work in practice, which I think is huge. I think a lot of people get very dogmatic in this space and they say my way is the right way. And then often they'll revamp their brand and they don't ever explain anything. And you're like, wait a minute, weren't you vegan 5 seconds ago? Or weren't you carnivore 5 seconds ago? Now what are you? And so I really love it when people are transparent and say, hey, I used to think this, but I've kind of learned that maybe that's not the only way you can do this. There's many, many ways you can go about losing weight. And that's one of the things I really respect about Ted and his work. All right, without any further ado, let's go into this wonderful discussion with Ted. You have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, lovely listeners. Today we have Dr. Ted Naiman on with us, and I've been following Ted for quite some time and really watched him evolve over time with his message and what he puts out. But I brought him on today because I really would love for him to talk to you about a brand new book he has turned out, Satiety per Calorie. So Ted, if you could say hi to everybody and then maybe kind of take us back a little ways in time, give us a little bit of insight as to what you're doing and how your evolution with food and what kind of led to the Satiety per Calorie book in your history. That'd be great, just for the listeners that might not be as familiar with you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. Great to talk to you. And I'm a primary care doctor. I've been doing this for a couple decades, and I'm super interested in diet and health. And I've been researching diet and exercise and health and the practical implementation of diet and exercise for decades now. And so I've written 2 books, the PE diet, basically looking at protein to energy ratio of your diet, and satiety per calorie, this most recent book. And all of this is basically decades of personal experimentation, interactions with clients, and just tons of research in the primary medical literature. Anything I can get my hands on how diet and exercise affects body composition, metabolic health, overall health outcomes, how to manipulate all of these factors. I've been researching this pretty much my whole career, and like you said, it has been an evolution. I started out just being like completely dumb and thinking that um, paleo diet was where it was at because like all I know is our modern diet is killing us off, and I don't know how or why. So if I'm just
Right.
religiously not eating gluten or legumes or something magical like that, then hopefully that'll work. But now that I've researched this as much as I have and I understand exactly what's going on and what the drivers are, uh, I've been able to sort of fine tune my message and kind of ended up at a little bit more moderate place compared to all the crazy diets I've ping ponged between over my life and my career, from like pure religious veganism
Hmm.
to low fat, low carb, keto, carnivore, paleo, and everything in between. And so what I've realized is every single one of these diets is right about something
Right.
and is helpful in some regard, but maybe not in others. And so, how do you actually sift through all this and zoom way out and get the big picture and find out what drives the success in each of these diet patterns and then where some of the pitfalls are? And it's a satiety per calorie is my attempt to synthesize absolutely everything in the diet space and make it all make sense into one giant meta view of diet in general. And I had to back way out and look at what is eating, go back to first principles, and then how these different factors affect um, caloric intake, body composition, metabolic health, and then what levers you can pull to change these, and how these different diet patterns basically interact with these factors. And the end result is I get to be way less religious and dogmatic about diet than I used to be. I was for a long time sort of religiously, vegetarian or low carb or keto or different things. And now I realize, oh, all of these have pluses and minuses, and you can kind of mix and match once you understand the big picture.
100%. And this is why I wanted to have you on in particular, because I have watched that happen for you. We've been doing this show since 2012. So I've been following you shortly thereafter. And I liked watching how you evolved. And I get asked this on a pretty regular basis. I do one on one coaching with people that want to lose weight and get healthy. And one of the ones is I'm overwhelmed. There's so much information out there. I did try being a vegan. I tried being a this. I tried being a that. And really, what they're looking for is like some basic truths to hold on to and feeling like they're kind of being pulled all over the place. And that's what I really liked about your book, because there was several factors that are just kind of universal truths amongst all of this that make sense. And so for the person who's listening to that feels that tug of war going on, could you maybe share one of the things I really love is how you're like the human body has certain requirements, right? And there's a certain protein kind of requirement, a certain food and weight volume requirement, and kind of how could we use that information to set us up for success when it comes to long-term sustainable weight loss?
Right. So, yeah, if you zoom way out, basically plants are making all the food for all animals, and they're doing two things. They're chaining together carbon atoms as some sort of energy source, which could either be carbohydrate or fat interchangeably. These are both chains of carbons with high energy bonds, and humans can very easily switch back and forth between these two forms of carbon energy, carbs and fats. And then protein, which is totally different and has a nitrogen atom attached to it. And plants are getting nitrogen and other minerals out of the soil to create protein. And then they're doing photosynthesis with carbon dioxide and water to form these chains of carbons that make all of our dietary energy, carbs or fats. And so you're pretty much eating to get protein and minerals from soil, and then chains of high energy carbon bonds from carbs or fats, which is basically solar energy stored in a chemical form, which is what photosynthesis is. So you're kind of eating to get protein and then non-protein energy, carbs and fats. And when I wrote the PE diet, it was looking at the importance of the ratio of protein to non-protein energy in your diet. Basically, the higher the protein percentage of your food is, the less food you have to eat because you're eating until you get enough protein. This is protein leverage, which most people are unaware of. They've never heard of it. They don't know what that means. Essentially, almost every animal on Earth, from insects all the way up to humans, eats until it gets enough protein, and only then will it stop eating. If you're eating low protein foods, you have to overeat calories to get enough protein to not be hungry. If you're eating super high protein percent foods, you can actually stop eating at a lower caloric intake because you've hit your protein goal. And so that's kind of this really big overarching factor here is protein percentage of diet and protein leverage. In satiety per calorie, I expanded on that to talk about the other things that humans do is we eat a certain weight and volume of food because we don't really know when we've eaten enough. Your brain has to guess based on all these gastrointestinal signals, these GLP-1 hormones that your gut uses to signal to your brain as to how much you've eaten. So we're kind of guessing by eating a certain weight and volume of food. So there's pretty much two things everybody's doing daily to eat to satiety. They're eating a certain amount of protein, and they're eating a certain weight and volume of food to just kind of feel full. And so if you can eat an adequate amount of protein and a high weight and volume of food for less calories, you're going to eat to satiety and not be hungry, but you're automatically going to lose weight. On the flip side, if you're eating, very high caloric density foods that you get a ton of calories in a very small weight and volume, you're probably going to overeat calories as you're eating to satiety. And also, if that food is protein dilute, you pretty much have to eat more because you're trying to get enough protein to not be hungry. So the goal is, increase the protein percentage of your food and then lower the energy density. So you're getting more weight and volume and fiber and water, and you have higher satiety for less calories. And that's the whole secret. That's the title of this book, Satiety per Calorie. The factors that raise satiety per calorie is a higher weight, which is water, higher volume, which is fiber, and a higher protein percentage, which is protein, versus carbs and fats. Things that lower satiety per calorie is refined energy sources, refined carbs, refined fats. These are very low in water and fiber, very low in protein. And they're also super hedonic because you get this combination of carb and fat together that really spikes dopamine in your brain and can be hyper rewarding and lightly addictive. And you just want to eat more. Not only do you have to eat more to get enough protein and weight and volume, but you want to eat more because it's the tastiest thing anybody's ever eaten. And then you've got this like combination of hedonic overeating because it's so tasty, and then homeostatic overeating, which means you just have to eat more to get enough protein.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just illustrate this for the listener because it took me hearing this multiple times from you via different interviews in the book to finally really, I think, have it hit home. Because I think when we think of protein percentage, right? Like we might say, okay, like a chicken breast is almost 100% protein. There's a little bit of fat, right? But if I'm eating 100 calories of chicken and say an entire bag of steamed broccoli, I might cumulatively have 2 pounds of food. I'm hitting, 30-ish grams of protein. I'm getting all this water and fiber. I might be full for hours eating this little 300 calorie or so meal. But if I get an entire bag of Doritos, and let's just, for argument's sake, say it's, I don't know, 2,000 calories, this mega family size bag of Doritos, and say that it just has, I don't know, 5 grams of protein in it, no water and fiber, I could easily have hit my calorie requirements for the day. But because I'm not getting in that protein from the chicken, the water and the fiber from the broccoli, from the Doritos, I'm still going to want to consume food until those requirements are met. Is that kind of how it could be explained to somebody in a food related way?
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. Yep, you're basically just getting twice the calories for half the weight and volume and protein, and that's exactly perfect.
Yeah. And one of the things that your book and your information has helped me with is I now prioritize that earlier in the day. And I think those of us who might be, in our 40s, 50s, and whatever, we were always like, oh, you're not hungry in the morning, just skip breakfast. And then you might see yourself eating a lot more in the afternoon and the evening. And after kind of reading your stuff and Eat Like the Animals and these other books I've read, it's almost like if we just kind of check these things off the list first, like have the protein first, have the water and fiber first, it makes eating the rest of the day easier. Do you see that being true with kind of like what you're putting out and the feedback you're getting? Do people find that that's true if they can check those markers off first in the day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%. That is absolutely what I'm seeing. But far more important than what I am seeing intuitively is what the data tells us. And we actually have studies where if you eat a certain amount of protein at your first meal, you're just going to automatically eat hundreds of calories less throughout your day. And the eating more protein earlier in the day is just an instant, huge, massive win for most everyone. And this is very strongly evidence based, and it also works in the real world with like real live humans. And so I see this all the time, all day long. So absolutely, very powerful.
Yeah, and let me ask you this too, because I know you probably prescribe the GLP-1 medications to help with weight, because you also are helping your patients with weight. Are these medications because maybe a lot of people don't understand this information, haven't been able to implement it, and because our food environment has changed so much that they're kind of helping to correct that process a little bit? Like, is that how you're seeing it as far as being a physician?
So interestingly, the GLP-1s are pretty much using this same trick that the food choices do, which is increasing satiety for fewer calories. Like technically, the highest satiety per calorie you can get is a GLP-1 drug with very, very strong satiety signaling and 0 calories. So however, you can layer all these things together, just like diet and exercise stack perfectly well. You can make some serious progress with your diet. And then if you stack different forms of exercise on top of that, cardio and step count and resistance training, you will actually get even faster results. The same thing is true of GLP-1 drugs, which can just be layered right on top of diet and right on top of exercise and right on top of a satiety per calorie approach. And it just adds to it in an additive fashion. So all of these things dovetail together quite well: diet, exercise, GLP-1s, and they all stack together quite well. And adding one or the other doesn't really change the dynamic that much because they're all using, different mechanisms and levers. So you can absolutely, change your diet and go on a GLP-1 and add in exercise, and you'll have an additive effect of all of these things.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So when you wrote this book, who was the intended audience, and which audience were you trying to tap into, and how were you trying to help specifically?
I'm really trying to help people who aren't where they want to be, but don't know what to believe because there's so much information out there and misinformation and dogma. I have so many patients who are like, okay, I just can't ever eat carbs. I know if I eat less carbs, I lose weight. So carbs are bad. Lower is better. The ultimate is 0. Now I'm keto. Now I'm carnivore. And people just get religiously and dogmatically locked into one thing that is usually helpful to a certain degree. Like, yes, reducing your refined carbohydrate intake is incredibly powerful. That does not mean that if you pull that all the way down to 0, you're going to be better off. So there's kind of a sweet spot. Each of these interventions is on a U-shaped curve where a moderate amount of carbohydrate reduction is awesome. And then driving all the way to 0 might not give you any additional return on your investment and could possibly slightly go negative at some point because you're not getting any fiber and you're not getting water from like fruits and vegetables. And now your energy density of your diet actually went up a little bit. So most of these diet religions have this facet of truth and they're right about one part of it. And some amount of applying that is good. But then people overdo it because people like to just zoom in on one thing and just take it all the way to infinity. You know what I mean? That's human behavior. And so this book is really for the person who doesn't know what to believe. They go on social media. Here's somebody who's totally ripped and jacked and they're vegan. That's got to be the secret. Here's somebody else who's ripped and jacked and they're pure carnivore. That's got to be the secret. Well, it can't be both of those. Like, so what the hell? So now, like, I don't know what to believe. I'm so confused. If this worked for this person, that means I got to do it too. But here's somebody who did the exact polar opposite. And now what does that mean? And so this book really just cuts through all the noise and all the confusion and just lays it all out for you. And anyone who reads this will know exactly why people have success to a certain extent with low carb or low fat or paleo or vegan or insert any diet pattern, diet religion here. And it gives you the power to kind of mix and match and take a little bit from all of them. And you get this major return on investment with just like a slight pull on all of these levers without like pulling the lever all the way to zero and then breaking it off and then actually starting to go backwards, which is what I see all the time with people who go, extremely low carb and then keto and carnivore. So in a way, this is kind of an escape hatch for anyone who's stuck on a dogmatic religious sort of diet religion, or for someone who just doesn't know what to believe, so they just eat whatever tastes good because, like, clearly anything, there's too much information out there and people have paralysis from that.
Yeah. One of the things I really wanted to know from you is too, when it comes to this, because you've openly said, I eat mostly these high satiety foods through the day, or this is at least what I recall hearing from some of your other interviews. And you said, but I always save some room at the end of the day for something kind of more palatable, fun. Because where I think a lot of people's brains would go is, oh, let me just maximize satiety per calorie, right? Like, let me take one good thing and just kind of really do it all in, And you're like, no, 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 you can still have this fun stuff. So in like all the trials that you've done or experimentation that you've done, what would you say is a good balance between the high satiety, high protein foods and still getting in a little bit of fun stuff? Like, is there a certain ratio or amount of the day that you should dedicate to that, where you can still reap a lot of the benefits from the high water, high fiber, high protein, but have a little bit in the tank for something fun?
Absolutely. And like every single the book just talks about this over and over and over and over and over again, how everything in life is on this U-shaped curve where there's like a sweet spot in the middle and then there's like a clearly too low and a clearly too high. And so satiety per calorie is the same way. The satiety per calorie scale is like 0 to 100, where a 0 is, chocolate chip cookies and a 100 is just like celery and watercress. And you really want to be like a 50, which is like steak and eggs in a salad. If you are way too low, that's just clearly bad, right? If you just try to live on cookies, this is going to be horrible. But too high is bad as well. It's not like, oh, higher is better. Well, I'm going to be 100 and just eat celery and watercress. You physically can't get enough calories from these foods and you'll be starving out of your mind and it'll just be an instant fail. So the secret is to find some sort of middle ground. Yes, you should absolutely have some higher satiety calorie foods and then some lower ones as well. And you have to find this sort of sweet spot in the middle. And it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. And it's also going to depend on your activity level. So you can't just prescribe score for someone and just have them nail that. What you want to do is look at where you're at and then just slightly go upwards in a very gradual, sustainable, reasonable fashion. So if your diet right now is 80% junk and 20% healthy foods, maybe you should go to 30% healthy foods and 70% junk. Mm-hmm. If you just jump straight to 99% high satiety foods like celery and 1% garbage, that's not going to work. That's definitely going to be a fail. So like, what's the answer? What's the secret? What's the spread? I can't tell you. All I know is it's probably a little higher satiety per calorie than where you're at currently if you're not at your goal. And so the whole secret to this is just slow, gradual, slight improvements in a progressive overload fashion where it's just a little bit higher than it was the day before, if you know what I'm saying. It's kind of like resistance training where you don't just throw an extra 1,000 pounds on the bar and you've never done a bench press before, you're going to, start out with just the bar and then add like, 5 pound plate on each side. And so you're doing the same thing with this satiety per calorie. And you're trying to get the ratio of junk food to super healthy food as higher than it was last time in a gradual, sustainable, progressive fashion. Somewhere in there, you will find the right balance for you.
Yeah.
But you're not going to find it without this just gradual titration and slow improvement over time compared to previous. And that's all I'm looking for anybody, is to just be aware of where you're at and then just make it slightly better one day at a time.
Yeah, so, like, if you're having something for breakfast, maybe you're having some Eggo waffles with a yogurt or something, noticing the Eggo waffles are extremely low on the satiety per calorie, you might be switching that out for something like a low carb wrap with eggs or something. Like, you're making these slow, sustainable changes to each meal as you go, and then finding where the weight starts to come down, or, maybe plateaus if it's been going up. You're saying, like, kinda take it meal by meal, choice by choice.
Right. And there's basically 3 ways you could do that. So let's say you're eating Eggos and yogurt, right? And the Eggos are low, the yogurt's higher. You can still eat Eggos and yogurt. Maybe why not eat, twice as much yogurt and half as much Eggos? Boom. That's a slight gradual improvement. So one strategy is just ratioing. Okay, yeah, I ate salad and Doritos. I had 1 leaf of lettuce and a family-sized bag of Doritos. Okay, maybe have like a big bowl of lettuce and half the bag of Doritos. So you're ratioing. That's one strategy. The other one is substitution. It's like, instead of Eggos, hey, maybe I get some whole wheat waffles or some protein waffles, or make my own waffles with a scoop of whey powder in there or something. That way I get to have waffles, but now I've got sugar-free syrup and I've got whole wheat and I've got protein added. And this is a substitution that just automatically improves satiety per calorie. Now, if all you eat is just Eggos and you have no healthy foods, and you might have to actually add something in, like add in the yogurt or add in something that's better, with higher protein and higher satiety per calorie. But those are your basic options. It's just like these small swaps or substitutions, or just simple ratioing. And it's easy to just keep eating the same things you're doing, but either swap in slightly healthier versions or ratio the good foods versus the less good foods, and or that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I had tried the Hava app for a month or so to try it out and see how it was. And one thing that was really shocking to me, because I eat a pretty high satiety diet as it is now, but I every once in a while, like a protein bar, and I
Hmm.
think those were like a 5 out of the scale. Like, I noticed they were kind of lower than I would have thought they would have been, but I
Hmm.
think it's because of the water and the fiber. And sometimes just even looking at the foods you're eating that maybe are quoted as being, healthier, or what you think would be high satiety, you might realize they're not, especially a lot of these commercially prepared things that are like, specifically low carb or high protein. They might not rank as high as you would think.
Yep. Now, like, you've been doing this forever, so you can just glance at stuff and kind of instinctively know. But
Mhm.
for somebody who's new to all this, that's who the app is helpful for, because they like basically have no clue, and this
Right.
just instantly tells you for everything, which is really helpful. But even for someone like myself, sometimes I'm a little surprised. Like you said,
Yeah.
I'm some of these protein bars, the energy density is super high, the fiber is super low, and you're also getting a hedonic effect by adding artificial sweetener to fat, which worsens the satiety per calorie hedonically. So sometimes I'm a little surprised too, because I'm like, oh, that's really not that great.
100%. Now, one thing I'd love to hear you speak to, because I see there's another kind of camp. There's different camps out there, right? There's the like the food grouping, like the vegan, paleo, carnivore, but then there's also the, is it hormonal or is it calories? Like, is it like we just eat from these foods and everything will be okay, or do we have to track calories? And there can be a lot of arguing online about that as well. And I just wanted to bring up calories because in the name of the book, it's satiety per calorie. And a lot of people would say, well, do I need to track calories? And I'm curious just to kind of hear what your thoughts are on that. Like, if you're making these substitutions, are counting calories going to be beneficial, or is that something that kind of works itself out via making these changes?
Yeah, and so anytime there's like a super polarized debate, Like, is it hormones or is it calories, right? Which one is it? You already know the answer is somewhere straight down the middle, right in between. And the answer is, in reality, it's absolutely, definitely both. So the hormonal signaling is what satiety is all about. So that's a huge big deal. That's what your GLP-1 is, and that's what your GI tract emits when you eat more protein and fiber and water and weight and volume. And so the hormones are huge, but the calories are real. Like, well, not that's not entirely true. Calories aren't real, but the carbon atoms that the calories come from are freaking absolutely real. So every single carbon atom that you ingest is going somewhere. If it's protein, it might end up in your lean mass. If it's fiber, it might pass through your GI tract and it gets excreted, unabsorbed. But all of your carbs and your fats that you ingest has to go somewhere. Pretty much every single gram of fat you eat ends up going to your fat cells where it's released later and you burn it if your activity level is high enough. So all of those carbons from non-protein energy and non-fiber energy, like refined carbs and refined fats, are being stored somewhere and those carbon atoms physically only leave your body via carbon dioxide when you exhale them after you've burned them off in your mitochondria, if your if your activity level is high enough. So there's this absolute carbon balance in your body where if you're ingesting more carbons, you have to store them as fat. But if you're burning more carbons, you're losing fat. So while calories aren't real, the carbons that create these high energy bonds that give us calories are absolutely physically real and physically have to go somewhere inside your body. Your body is just a giant mechanical machine, and all the carbons of fat you ingest are going somewhere. They're going to your fat cells and only get released later and burned if you're active enough. And I explain all of this in the book in a ton of detail, probably too much detail. I'm not going to lie. The book's like over 500 pages long, and there is some definite heavy biology in there. I pretty much explain exactly what eating is, how all the macros get to where they are, and then what happens in your body in terms of storage and metabolism and hormones. And I pretty much lay out the whole thing. I try to do it as simply as possible, but it is like a mechanical machine, and those carbons are going somewhere. So people who are calorie deniers are, sure, there's no such thing as a calorie, right? And we're just eating until we're not hungry. So that could be more or less calories. But those carbon atoms are going somewhere. And if you can get the same satiety for less ingested carbons from carbs and fats, you are going to be thinner. You are going to store less fat. You might lose more fat. So there's a very absolute reality. And so anyone who's like, is it hormones or is it calories? It's exactly straight down the center.
Both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great. And so somebody though, if they wanted to like follow the principles in the book and they had no interest in say tracking calories at all, if they were to kind of go meal by meal and do what we suggested, which is putting more high satiety food in, reducing the less satiety food, kind of working on that ratio over time based on how we tend to eat to satiety, we should start to see some improvements without maybe having to track every single calorie. Would that be
Absolutely.
fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like nobody has to track everything. It's all about food choice. Let's say you choose a food and you look at a nutrition label and there's another version of the food and you look at that nutrition label. Anytime you can get the protein and fiber grams a little higher and the non-fiber carbs and fat a little lower, boom, you just improve satiety per calorie. And so you could just make a series of small little tweaks like that all day long, and you will steadily change the trajectory of your weight. Currently, if you're on an uphill, maybe you'll flatten it out, or maybe you'll go downhill. So absolutely, you don't have to track anything if you don't want to. It's all about food choice. How much you eat is determined by what you eat. If you choose a food with a higher type of calorie, you're just going to automatically eat less calories, even if you're not tracking anything. So it's really all about food choice and understanding what makes one food slightly better or slightly worse than another food. And this book gives you the power to do all of that without any actual satiety score numbers or tracking anything or ever looking at calories. In fact, in the Hava app, yes, it tracks your calories quite exactly, but nobody cares and nobody even looks at it. And never look at how many calories I eat. I literally couldn't care less. I just
Yeah.
eat till I'm not hungry. The question is, uh, am I eating a ton of excess calories while I'm doing that because my food choices suck? Or am I actually pretty low on calories because I had these crazy high satiety per calorie foods that I chose? So a big difference in outcome just based on food choice, and nobody needs to track their calories.
I love it. And one thing I gotta come back to because again, I know this audience and we tend to hear all these polarizing things and there's a lot of fear mongering about everything, right? This dye, just artificial sweeteners, egg yolks, like there's always something, right? And I know you had mentioned the artificial sweeteners being mixed in with the protein bar, but then what I think sometimes people want to do is they want to be purity, like they want to have the perfectly pure diet, super clean, nothing mixed in. Do you see, for when we're talking about weight management, that things like artificial sweeteners, stuff like that, are more of a help or a hindrance for people based on kind of all your years of exploring this?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. First of all, I hate fear mongering, and
Yes.
there's just absolutely no fear based any kind of in this book at all. Like I've completely done away with that. In fact, I'm going the opposite and really emphasizing the positive. Like you get to eat all these foods, and you get to eat some total garbage, and you get to eat artificial sweeteners, and you get to eat all it's very much wide open without any of this fear-based stuff and without labeling foods as good or bad, but specifically with artificial sweeteners. If you're consuming them in a 0 calorie product, they're absolutely great. They're spectacular. I freaking love them. Like diet soda, now we have three very large randomized placebo controlled proper trials comparing diet soda and artificially sweetened beverages with literally water. And
Mhm.
diet soda is better for fat loss in overweight and obese people. So I love artificial sweeteners. I'm not afraid of any of them. I'm literally consuming all of them: aspartame, sucralose, erythritol, you name it. I don't really care. I'm not fear mongering about any of that. Now, I will say that there's probably some evidence that if you add an artificial sweetener to a very, very high fat food, you might increase its consumption slightly based on hedonics. Like if I gave you some peanuts versus honey roasted peanuts with artificial sweetener, you might actually eat more honey roasted nuts with the artificial sweetener than you would of just the nuts by themselves. You know what I mean? Like, just because adding that sweetness to fat might actually slightly increase your intake. But when it comes to like a like a sugar-free Jello or an low or no calorie artificially sweetened beverage, it's awesome. Go crazy. I mean, I have patients losing tons of weight eating like are drinking a half a dozen Diet Cokes a day. Couldn't care less. It's awesome. It's probably slightly better than just water. It basically satisfies a sweet taste craving that humans naturally have, for a very good reason, for no calories at all. So it's just a massive win. It's like no calories, no problem. There's a lot of fear mongering out there that's literally not evidence based and basically garbage. And this fear based approach is not helpful. I don't like it, and it needs to die in a fire.
I 100% agree. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for Diet Coke and Diet Root Beer. Like, just kidding. But I started my weight loss journey in 2006, and a lot of the stuff thank God I wasn't privy to it because the internet wasn't, I mean, social media wasn't then what it is now. And I just kicked them back and enjoyed them. I still enjoy them, but I see so many people. I have somebody who's a good 100+ pounds overweight and they're like, I really need to take diet soda out of my diet. And I'm like, no, that's not your problem. Like keep the diet soda. Let's focus on the pizza that's going with it, right? Like, but because we hear it over and over and over again in the media, we really think we're doing something catastrophically wrong. And then we sometimes focus on the wrong things. And that's why I really wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Yep, yep. No, you're absolutely preaching to the choir. I'm drinking diet soda every freaking day of my life. And I have all of these bikini models and ripped and jacked bodybuilders and fitness aesthetic people who are just achieving these crazy mind-blowing goals and using the absolute hell out of artificial sweeteners the entire time. So anyone who's like, "Oh, that artificial sweetener is keeping you fat," is it's actually worse than wrong. It's actively unhelpful and maybe slightly worse than if they didn't say anything at all. So this is the kind of misinformation we're just surrounded with right now. And honestly, social media is such an incredible cesspool of good and bad information. You like get equal quantities of good and bad at the same time, and they're diametrically opposed, and nobody has any clue what's right or what's wrong. And it's very confusing, and I can see how it's a total fail. Um, and usually everybody's right about one little thing, but then wrong about a bunch of others. And how on earth do you sift through that? It's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Well, and that was gonna be one of my questions for you, because again, I've watched you evolve over time with your messaging and, kind of saying, "Okay, no, maybe it's not this, maybe it's this," and you really have been willing to, like, notice how, as trends have come and gone, you're like, "Oh, no, wait, there are these consistent truths," right? And, because obviously something in there pulled you in and it got you thinking maybe that was the way, and then you figured it out. Is there anything that our audience could listen for or pay attention to, whether it's a blog post, a podcast episode, that would key them in, like any specific types of phrases or anything like that? Because I feel like so many people just keep getting hoodwinked about this stuff. And if they could be like looking out for certain things, that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, really, honestly, there's so many anecdotes out there. This person got ripped and jacked on white bread and soda, and this person got ripped and jacked eating McDonald's, and this person got, had success on there because their anecdotes are everywhere in every direction. It's really has to be evidence based. You're looking for a randomized human controlled trial with actual physical outcomes, not some vague mechanistic like on a cellular level this and this happens and so therefore it's bad. We have all these mechanistic cellular level findings on like animal models and cellular models for artificial sweet. Any substance you could name that you just dump on top of a cell culture is going to give it a bad outcome. Even protein, if you look at like cellular level studies on protein, it's terrible. It's toxic and horrible. And like, but if you look at actual outcomes data in human randomized controlled trials, and you especially if you have a meta-analysis of human randomized controlled trials, this is super strongly evidence-based, and you can really basically believe in that, and that's all we've got. And so you have to just cling to this kind of actual human outcomes data that's evidence-based. Everything else is just possible bullshit. I hate to say it.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like a couple key things for them to look out for is one, they don't reference anything that would be a published scientific study. Number two, it's like always on one extreme or the other. It seems to be a consistent thing I hear. And they're usually like saying this is the one way, right? The white bread, the McDonald's, the whatever, and trying to convince you. And they're using usually one person or a very small group of people as the example set for that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Now you showed me like a meta-analysis of randomized human-controlled trials. I'm very much paying attention to that. But if you've got like this one person on social media who got this crazy result with this crazy thing, yeah, and then oh, and by the way, they happen to be selling the same product.
Yeah.
That's where you need to just absolutely ignore it.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, for the people that are listening to this that maybe are financially incapable of being on a GLP-1 medication, or their insurance is not going to approve them for a GLP-1 medication, or maybe they're afraid they're going to have really negative side effects. Could this approach to eating help them get a good amount of weight off naturally and somewhat mimic that without it obviously being as extreme as a medication? I mean, in your opinion, have you seen that to be true or no?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I now the GLP-1 drugs are even more powerful because you can get insane concentrations of these drugs that you could never achieve with your diet. But this sort of dietary strategy is like a low budget GLP-1 approach. You're basically choosing foods that give you the highest GLP-1 release in your gastrointestinal tract for the fewest storable calories. So it's technically like the low budget diet version of GLP-1s. So it's absolutely a legitimate way of looking at it. In fact, the GLP-1 drugs just happen to be the highest satiety per calorie that you can get on the planet. So it's literally the same concept and the same cause and effect. It's just the GLP-1 drug is cranked all the way up in terms of satiety and all the way down on calories. Versus food choice is not quite that extreme. But yes, this is like a low budget GLP-1.
I love that. And then for somebody like you were mentioning before, somebody who's this is really a new concept, you think something like the Hava app could help them to become more aware of the book is really good at teaching it, but the Hava app might be helpful for them just checking in with their daily food choices. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think for the uninitiated who are like, what the heck are you even talking about? The Hava app is the easiest way to get up to speed, the fastest. The book is good, but let's face it, it's like 500 pages. It's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm sure nobody's even actually read the whole thing because it's just so long.
Well, actually, I'll be totally transparent. I bought it. I had
Mhm.
ChatGPT read it to me because
There you go.
I have to do a lot of my reading when I'm cooking and cleaning. I homeschool my kids. I have to do it
Hmm.
intermittently. So that's the only way I could get through it. Not because
Yep.
it's a bad book. It's just
Hmm.
because of the amount of content. So that is a trick if anyone wants to get it in. You just have ChatGPT read it off to you. It worked out really well.
Yeah, and I apologize. The book is like so lengthy. I just wanted to. It was just like a complete brain dump. But I do think that it would help somebody out there who's
Mhm.
confused by all the misinformation or basically good and bad information at the same time in equal quantities. And the Hob app's the fastest, easiest way to just boom immediately get up to speed. Plus, it's just way fun to play around with. It's very entertaining. Um, but yeah, I think those are two really good, helpful things for a lot of people.
No, I so appreciate you coming on today and sharing all of this with us because I know my audience, there are people that have really struggled with weight for a very long time and they keep getting bumped from thing to thing to thing. And now we even have this other thing, which is these medications that are helping out people, but not everybody can afford them or get their hands on them. So I want to make sure that they have access to this information because when I read the book, I loved it. I thought it was great, but I like that kind of stuff anyway. And I know that it could just truly be helpful. Could you, just before we part though, could you maybe just share with everybody like what a day of eating would maybe look like on this kind of a plan, just so that they understand maybe like how the structure would look or like what you would eat on it following it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's say, somebody's eating cereal and toast for breakfast, right? You're eating cereal and toast and an egg. Um, okay, after reading the book and plugging on the Hob app, you're like, ooh, cereal, not the greatest. That I could get a high protein cereal, right? There are now these super awesome high protein cereals. That's gonna allow you to eat cereal, but immediately have a way higher satiety per calorie. The milk you're putting on your cereal, instead of just like whole milk, maybe get like a Fairlife fat-free milk, which is this ultra-filtered milk that has no fat, very low lactose-free technically, and it's basically like just like a protein supplement with like 13 grams of protein for 80 calories. Is like it's just pure protein. So you get the protein cereal, the Fairlife milk. Instead of just white bread toast, you get the, Dave's Killer Bread or the Ezekiel bread or the sprouted grain, super healthy, high, this bread has way more weight, way more fiber, way more volume, way higher satiety per calorie. And instead of like one egg, maybe you have two eggs. Maybe you're ratioing the eggs in the toast, like two eggs and one slice of toast instead of one egg and two slices of toast. Maybe you're making a scramble with two eggs and two egg whites and just double the protein content for the same amount of calories. So you're making all these little substitutions or tweaks or additions. Or you could just switch all the way over to like what I eat for breakfast, which is like fat-free Greek yogurt and then some blueberries or blackberries or berries on top of fat-free Greek yogurt. You're getting water and fiber and weight and volume from the berries. You're getting just a ton of protein from the low-fat Greek yogurt. And then, like, for lunch, okay, let's say you just have a sandwich for lunch. Great, have a sandwich for lunch. Keep doing that. Oh, but now, maybe make it a tortilla wrap with a low-carb tortilla. Maybe add in more protein. Maybe use a skinless chicken breast for the protein in double quantity. Maybe add in more greens, peppers and onions and lettuce and all these flavor vegetables that have really high weight and volume, really low calories, and just massive improvement to your satiety per calorie. So now instead of a sandwich, you got this wrap with like tons of skinless chicken breast and low calorie condiments and low carb tortilla instead of just bread or a Subway roll or something like that. And you've just eaten the same thing, but it radically improves the satiety per calorie. And then for dinner, instead of just like chicken nuggets and french fries, okay, you're still having chicken nuggets and french fries, but you're making your chicken nuggets in the air fryer by just getting some low fat ground chicken, making little patties out of it, breading those, frying them in the air fryer with, just like a spray oil or very low added fat. Now you've got chicken nuggets, sure, but it's super higher satiety per calorie. You're using like a sugar-free barbecue sauce. Instead of french fries, you're cutting potatoes into french fry shape and then air frying them with no added fat. You get to eat, tons of potatoes that way for way lower calories. And so now you've got this huge plate of air fryer fries with no added fat and tons of these chicken nuggets that are super low fat, low carb, high protein. And you're basically just making small tweaks, substitutions, or ratios that radically improve this type of calorie. So you're still eating tons of food. You're totally not hungry. It's still pretty tasty. I mean, it's not like 10 out of 10 like the super high calorie, high fat, regular breaded chicken nuggets and fries, but it's like a 7 or 8 out of 10 tasty and very sustainable, but way less calories. You're just automatically getting closer to your goals for not a ton of change or effort. You know what I'm saying? And it's just these small little changes that you apply consistently over and over and over again that's really going to move the needle over time. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and there's one thing I just want to caveat on what you just said there, because when I first started my weight loss journey, I wouldn't have believed I could go weeks, if not a month, without having New York style pizza, because I was eating it 2 or 3 times a week when I was at my heaviest. But then I started making these substitutions, like what you said, low carb wraps. I made them into pizza pockets, stuff like that. And over time, and I know a lot of people, because at first you want the 10 out of 10, but over time, your taste buds do adjust down. And that 7 out of 10 actually starts to become your normal. And then when you do have that pizza again that you used to have, you still like it and still tastes really good, but it's not the same as it was before. Your taste buds are very fluctuating, is I guess what I'm trying to say, and not to be fearful of making those changes, because what if I don't ever like this? They will modify over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you get a little bit of a hedonic reset, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't have to eat Haagen-Dazs 3 times a day, every day in, day out. Or if you're like me, you just have a giant salad with a ton of chicken breast on top, a low calorie dressing, oil-free dressing, eat this giant salad, and then have like one slice of actual, New York pizza, like, and then you're just kind of ratioing it and you still get to eat some of this food that's not optimal satiety per calorie. So that's kind of my style. Now there are people out there with like food addiction issues who can't just have one slice of that super good pizza, and maybe they need to just make their own that's less hedonic and they're just not going to overeat it. But for some people, they can absolutely fit some of that in there. They just have to ratio it. You know what I'm saying? More salad, one slice pizza instead of no salad and the whole pizza.
Right, 100%. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time today, Ted, to talk to us. I'm going to definitely include the link to your book. I know it's for sale on Amazon. I think I bought it directly off of your website, though, because you offered it as a PDF download and something else. So where can everyone go to find you? And then if they want to get their hand on the book, what would be the best way to do that?
Gotcha. Well, I'm on all the socials at Ted Naiman, at X and Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff at Ted Naiman. You can go to tednaiman.com. You can go to satietypercalorie.com. You can just Google satiety per calorie. You can go to any place. You can buy Satiety per Calorie, the book, anywhere books are sold, anywhere. But yes, I am selling a PDF version that, first of all, you can just have it on any device and it's not copy protected in any way, so you can pretty much do anything you want with it. And I'm offering a total money back guarantee. If this is not the single best book on the general principles of diet and exercise that you've ever read in your entire life, you just tell me what book was better and you get a full refund and you still get to keep the book. Like you cannot lose. It's like, because I would love to know, like, have you read a better book on the general principles of diet and exercise than Satiety per Calorie? I haven't, and I would like to. So please tell me what that book is, because I do want to read it. I don't think it's out there. I haven't had to refund anyone yet.
No, and honestly, I do a lot of reading about weight loss, anything weight loss related, anything that could help I just got done reading a slew of the GLP-1 books that came out. And honestly, hands down, yours covers it from the bottom up. It's just like all the important aspects that you need to know. So I haven't found one better yet, but if I find one, I'll let you know.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. At which point you'll get a full refund.
Absolutely. All right. So they have all the ways they can reach you, Ted. They can go to your website and get the book. Thank you again, truly from the bottom of my heart, that you were able to get this in today. And I hope your wife is doing much better.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, and check out the Hava app. I teamed up with Dr. Andreas Einfeld of Diet Doctor fame. And if you go to hava.co or just look for Hava, Hava, in the App Store, check that out. And it's pretty entertaining.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to visit halfsizeme.com. Check back often for your daily dose of inspiration, because you are worth it.
The information you hear on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The host is not a medical professional. You should always consult with your doctor, nurse, or other certified health professional before beginning any diet or fitness program.